Welcome to the Teach Joyfully podcast, where we talk about all things elementary teaching with some mom stuff thrown in. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5. I'll be your host. Thanks for joining me today. So today, I'd like to talk about 5 ways that we can sabotage our students' independence. But it's also a simple thing to correct. It's not always easy, but it is simple. So let's dive in. What are my 5 things? Well, number 1, accept assignments anytime. Yep, it sounds like something that, students didn't get it in. You want to get the work in. You want to make sure that they've done it and they've practiced. And we have all these reasons why we're still accepting work a week or even longer after it was due. It makes for a lot of extra work for us, and it's not helping our students. Clear, hard due dates are essential for students to learn to hold to a deadline. Yes, even those little kids. It's really important because it's a life skill. You're setting them up for success or failure with this very skill. There's no longer any value in an assignment when we don't care when you get it. If students don't do it on time, they're probably not going to do it until the end of the quarter when they realize that they're failing or their parents realize it. And then suddenly you get a flood of activity of all these late assignments. Have you been there? Because I have. And it's a nightmare. And I've never made that mistake again. If you start out by enforcing your deadlines, your students and families will learn that the deadline is the deadline. If you really want to accept things late, you can knock off some points for each day that it's late until it's basically worth nothing. That's the best way to do it. If you really feel like you want to accept some late work, I absolutely understand. Now, if a student's been absent, absolutely, there are different rules for that. But if a student has been in class and they simply didn't do their work, that's a whole other ball of wax. Okay, number 2, picking your battles. Now, we say this all the time. Oh, pick your battles. Oh, pick your battles. You don't have to worry about every little thing, right? And it sounds great, right? Except, aren't your rules always the rules? Because if they're not always the rules, then now we're telling the students that they're sometimes the rules. And that's a problem. Set your rules, decide exactly what it is that you want your students to be doing all the time. How are they going to behave during independent work time? How are they going to behave during group time? How are they going to behave when they get up to get a pencil? You need to figure out exactly how you want your classroom to run and train with great detail to how you want things done. If you're extremely clear, your students will get it and they'll do it. You know those teachers whose classrooms just run like clockwork? This is why. Because they don't pick their battles, they train in great detail how they want things done, and they make the kids toe the line. They hold that line 100%. And then you simply don't have to fight those battles all the time because your students will know. Does that mean that they'll never mess up? Oh no, of course they're going to mess up. They're children, and that's okay. But when you go back and have them do a do-over and remind them exactly how it needs to go, they'll go back, do it again correctly, and you can move forward. So for example, if you have a student who kind of hangs up their backpack, but it always seems to be falling on the floor, or they're not doing it correctly, or they don't bother to hang it up, they just throw it in there and it's always in the way. If you have rules about how backpacks are supposed to be hung up and everything should be neat and tidy, then you need to make that student go back and do it over again and do it correctly every single time. If you do, then eventually they'll just do it right the first time. Because here's the deal, they'll get tired of going back and doing it over all the time. Now, I know you think you don't have time to do all these things, but you do. If you start now, and really train, it will save you so much time for the rest of your entire school year. It will. It's worth the investment of time now. When everyone in your class knows the expectations and they know you mean it, it will save you time and frustration all year long. And that means your students gain more time to learn. And I know for many teachers, this might seem like a really harsh way to be, but it's not, because it frees you up to enjoy your class instead of lecturing, reminding, and being frustrated with your class. So, wouldn't you rather be the teacher who can just go and have fun with your class and learn and do great things instead of constantly reminding them how to behave? It's a gift that you can give your students. By not keeping firm boundaries on your rules and expectations, your students don't know if they really can trust what you say. If you say something and you're not going to consistently enforce it, then maybe you mean what you say and maybe you don't mean what you say. So now you've created a lot of uncertainty and stress in your classroom. I can't tell you how often my own kids come home from school and they're so frustrated or stressed in a classroom because their teacher's boundaries seem to move and they're not consistent. If you are consistent, you are giving your students a gift, the gift of knowing that you mean what you say and that you care enough about them to enforce it. Okay, let's jump off my soapbox and go to number 3. Number 3 is overpraising and rewarding. Now, this is especially a problem in the elementary grades, right? I mean, as elementary teachers, we overpraise and we reward constantly. We have whole class rewards, pizza parties, marble jars, all tickets, classroom economies, all kinds of things that we do. We're jumping around in circles and bending over backwards to make sure that students behave. Whether you think of it that way or not, we really do. But have you ever done things like this and it feels like the reward is no longer working? Yeah, here's why. Research shows that rewards have a diminishing effect when you expect them. So by rewarding our students for expected behaviors all the time, guess what? They expect the reward or else they aren't going to behave. And even bigger, we've taken away their ability to be just proud of themselves for doing the right thing or working hard or doing great work. We've taken that ability away from them because they're no longer working for the intrinsic value. They're now working for the reward. If we reward infrequently, occasionally, as a surprise, as a treat, then that reward is very successful. Those are times when your students don't know when to expect it, but it can happen. And you're just saying, I'm just so proud of all of us for working so hard. Or I'm so proud of you for doing such a great job when I know how hard you had to work at this because it was really a struggle. Those are times when that reward is very successful. It has the effect that we want it to have. But when we're rewarding students to behave and we're rewarding students for things that we expect, we now are really begging our students to do what we want them to do. We're actually manipulating them. And that is not good. Your students may not actually get it just yet, but at some point they'll understand that it's actually a manipulation. It's not really a reward. Okay, number 4. Over-helping. Oh, it's so easy to do this. And even as a mom, I have to be very careful about not over-helping, especially when my kids were really young, because our lives are busy. And sometimes it's easier just to do it ourselves than to have our students or our children do it, right? Whether it's making their bed, cleaning up after themselves, making sure their name's on their paper, typing in their password for an account that they need to use for homework, whatever that detail is that we're jumping in and doing for our child, we are over helping. We need to teach, model, and let them try. And yes, sometimes we need to let them fail. It is so hard, especially when we're busy, not to jump in and rescue. But even when it feels like it's faster, I have to tell you, you'll always be in a hurry and you're always going to be pressed for time. It's the nature of our business. If you don't let them do it right now, when will they have time to learn it? And when will they be motivated to learn that task? Because you're already going to do it for them, right? I have a quote that I love from John Wooden. It says, "If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?" And I have to tell you, when you don't have time to let your students try, when will they have time to learn it later? They won't. This is the new normal. Is that what you want? Is you want this now to be your task and not their task? Because if that's the case, fine. But if that's not, then you need to let them try, even though it takes longer, even though you feel pressed for time, even though they aren't doing it the way that you want them to do. You just have to let them try, and yes, sometimes fail. And last but not least, number 5, not training our students in how to appropriately self-advocate. Yep, we jump into all the problems and help fix things way too often. We need to quit fixing things for our students and show them how to do it themselves. The best thing you can do for your students is to teach them how to advocate for themselves. An example of this actually from me as a mom is helping my own children learn how to talk to their doctor. When our kids are little, we take them in if they're sick or it's their regular appointment. It's mom or dad talking to the doctor, right? But if we can train our children how to talk to the doctor and give the answers for themselves, it's empowering and it also sets them up for success later in their lives. The same is true in the classroom. When a student is having a problem, instead of jumping in and trying to fix the problem and figure out what the problem is, we need to train our students in how to solve the problem. So giving them scenarios to practice with long before problems happen can help tremendously. How about a scenario that says, maybe somebody's saying mean things to another child on the playground? You can model with your students what to do. The students can help you come up with ideas on how to handle the situation. There's lots of scenarios that happen in the classroom and on the playground that you can set up for your students and model and practice so that they're ready to test out having to advocate for themselves. Even if it's as simple as how to ask for help. Asking a teacher or another adult in the school for help when they need it can be a scary situation for lots of kids, and they will avoid it like the plague. But knowing how to ask for help is a life skill. And if you can help train your students to advocate for themselves and ask for help when they need it, it is going to be a major win, not just for you and your classroom, but in their lives. I have a playground packet that I use that teaches students how to advocate for themselves on the playground. It teaches rules of diplomacy and interaction on how to actually problem solve. This is a great place to start if you're looking for somewhere to begin. I'll link it in the show notes for you. It's a great place to start your kids out on learning to advocate for themselves. Once they have that under control, you can start adding in more and more pieces. You don't have to throw your students out there and let them do everything on their own. Start somewhere. Help them learn how to advocate in one area, and then just start keeping your teacher radar up, looking for ways that students can maybe learn to take on advocating for themselves in various scenarios. And then you can begin to help model and train your students for those situations. So let's do a quick recap here. Make sure that you set firm deadlines for assignments and rules about late work. Do not pick your battles. If you have a rule or procedure, it matters. Use praise carefully and intentionally so it empowers and doesn't make your students dependent. Don't reward, treat. Treat your students infrequently. Surprise them when they've just been doing great. It's an encouragement, but it's not an expectation. Don't do anything for your students that they can possibly reasonably do for themselves. This is the best way to have independence in your classroom. And teach your students how to self-advocate when they're having problems. So give it a try. I can't wait to hear what's working for you. And don't forget, you can grab all my freebies at www.hopeinEducation.com/vault. That link is in the show notes as well at www.hopeinEducation.com/podcast. And don't forget, I will throw in a link to that playground packet so you can grab that or check it out as well. And that's it, my teacher friends. We're out of time and I'm out of breath. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, I'd love it if you'd go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave a review. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Also, you can continue the conversation online with me in my Facebook group, the Teach Joyfully Podcast Community, where elementary teachers can connect, get help, and encouragement for all kinds of education and parenting topics. You can find the show notes and the links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.